So today I want to talk about something that's both personal to me and I think widely relevant to men specifically, and that's the issue of porn. So if we look at kind of where we're at in history, we've seen some crazy increases in technology, and these technologies have been great. They've brought us things like the smartphone, which allows us to answer questions, in a couple seconds. Any question you have, you can pretty much find the answer. But at the same time, we now have discrete and portable access to some pretty horrific stuff. So my story starts when I was in fifth grade. I was at a friend's house. We were hanging out in his basement, and he went to another room and went on the computer and called me in there. And when I walked in, he had pulled up a picture of two naked girls. And I remember just feeling this pit of the stomach feeling. You gotta remember, I was in fifth grade. I had never seen anything like this. And I knew it was something I shouldn't be looking at. But at the same time, there was that curiosity and a bit of excitement around it. I don't think from that moment on, I was necessarily, addicted or anything like that. But within the next year or two, by the time I was in middle school, I was definitely addicted and watching porn every day. At that time, I had this little device that we used to call a PSP. It was a PlayStation Portable that my parents had gotten for me, but they didn't know that it had access to the internet, much like smartphones do now. It's just a gaming console, but I could go and search things. I remember coming home from church and watching it. And at first it was like this secretive, like I knew I wasn't supposed to be doing this sort of thing. But eventually you just sort of tune that out. You become hardened to that. You don't really worry about it. It's just one of the things that you do. And I remember I would tell myself, like, when I need to stop, I'll be able to stop. This isn't really a problem. I mean, it's your typical addiction rationalization. This also completely shaped the way that I interacted with girls. I grew up as the oldest of four boys, so in a very masculine dominated house. I didn't have much interaction with girls, and then the only real exposure that I had was through something like porn. The other thing that I've reflected on quite a bit is the fundamental nature in which porn is different than real sex in a loving relationship. Masturbating and watching porn is inherently self-centered. It's all about gratifying yourself, right? Where in contrast, sex in a loving relationship, as Christians, we believe it's really a sacrament. You're giving yourself to your spouse. And so when you've learned everything you know really about sexual experience in this selfish and shame attached way, there's going to be consequences that you bring into marriage. And so when I think back to, my justification that I'll only do this for now and later on, I won't carry any of the baggage. It's like, yeah, well, good luck with that. There's so many kids growing up now with iPhones that, they start with at 9, 10, 11 years old that are secretly becoming very addicted to porn without realizing what it's doing to their mind and their spirit. And because I happen to have this PSP that allowed me to access the internet at a young age, it's almost like getting a little precursor on what that's like. I'm sure there's other people, that were in the same boat as me, but I don't think we have these conversations as publicly as we should if we want to have any hope of combating these sort of issues. So if we fast forward to around my senior year of college, I had studied abroad for my second semester of my junior year in Barcelona, Spain. I'd kind of gotten out of some environments that weren't maybe the healthiest, and definitely found some environments in Spain that were not necessarily healthy either, but I wasn't living in the same setting. And when I got back, I kind of knew that I needed to make some changes. I needed to really investigate the faith that I'd grown up with seriously. And so around that time, when I decided to sort of commit to that, I knew that there were two things in my life that just were not compatible with the heart of God. And so those were weed and porn. I was smoking a lot before, and I'll talk about that in another video, I think. But it was just so clear to me that those two things are not compatible with actually following the Lord. When I first tried to stop watching porn, I remember this distinctly. for about 2 months, every time I would try to go to sleep, I would close my eyes and I would just have graphic sexual images in my head. And it was really dark and discouraging, and you just felt really dirty. And so what I decided to do, because I knew I needed something for my mind to hold on to while I tried to sleep, was I'd put on sermons or worship music. But at the beginning, it was mostly sermons. And so I would listen to these sermons, just even if it was passively, so that my mind could grab onto things that were true instead of, being tormented, for lack of a better term. And it wasn't easy, but this actually sort of got me through that period, and also worked to kind of reinforce my beliefs while this was happening. And so thankfully, after about that 2-month mark, those images kind of went away. I also had some help from the Navigators when I was at the University of Georgia. I joined what they called a sexual integrity Bible study. And basically what that involved was everybody sitting around a table. This was probably about 20 guys. And once a week, you'd go around the room and every person would have to say what they did that week. So meaning, if you watched porn and masturbated 4 times, you have to say that in front of a group of other guys, which is not comfortable. We'd also go through a book that kind of talked about God's design for sex. And so it was positive kind of reorientation, right? We were refocusing on the positive, on the way that sex was meant to be used. So not everyone's going to have access to something like that, but I know there's tons of like accountability group sort of things. A lot of different organizations exist. I think the hard part is reaching out, because it's so attached to shame. I think porn and shame are so deeply intertwined. And you'd be amazed when you tell someone that cares about you what you're struggling with. And there's just something about sexual sin, I think, that makes us extra shameful. But once you can kind of share that with someone else, there's a weight that gets lifted off of you. Because at least for me, and maybe I'm, projecting or something, but for me, it just feels so dirty. You think, like, specifically with sexual things, that if I share this with so-and-so, they're not going to look at me the same way. But you'd be amazed how many other guys are struggling with the exact same thing. And guys that you would think, that guy is such a good guy, there's no way that he would do that. The other thing I'll say is, when you become intentional about not doing something, it actually becomes harder at first, because you're thinking about it more. So if you're just thinking all the time, like, don't watch porn, like, you're probably going to fail. There has to be some sort of like refocus. There has to be like shifting that energy. I know some people talk about working out, like how especially guys in their teens and 20s have a lot of testosterone. It just needs to get worked out, right? So go to the gym, play sports, like use that energy in a positive way. Terms like semen retention and NoFAP. There are these kind of movements that people are recognizing, hey, it's probably not good, the amount of porn that we're watching. And so they're finding ways to sort of challenge themselves to not watch porn or not masturbate for periods of time. And I would say if they're doing that without even having sort of like a spiritual imperative, then why can't we figure out how to stop doing this? I saw some stats the other day that I think it was 1 in 5 youth pastors like regularly like struggles with porn use, and like 1 in 7 senior pastors. This was in the mid 20-teens, but I mean, I don't imagine that's changed that much, and COVID definitely didn't help with people being locked down. But if our leaders are silently dealing with this, then can you imagine what the congregations are? And like, it's so clearly it so clearly takes us away from loving relationship, which is the heart of life, in my opinion. Now, let's be realistic. It wasn't like after 2 months I never watched porn again, everything was good, right? There's ups and downs, but things were significantly better. And I can say now, 4 or 5 years down the road, porn is not a struggle for me anymore, at least in the way that it was before. There's still lust that comes in. I mean, if you've been on social media in the past however long, there are so many temptations. There's so many things that are trying to lure you in. But watching porn specifically has been kind of ruled out for me. And I think part of that comes from it not fitting in with who I am, with who God says I am, with who I view myself to be. Porn is a lie. Watching porn is a lie. You're engaging in a fantasy. And so when you engage in lies, all it does is make you weaker. I love the picture that The Great Divorce by C.S. Lewis gives us on lust and its power over us. If you haven't read the book, it's a phenomenal book. It's very short. But it's essentially takes place on the outskirts of heaven. There's a bus that brings people every year from like this purgatory sort of world, and they have an opportunity to actually enter heaven. And what you see throughout the book is all of these people have these different excuses that they make, different things that they're holding on to or are being held on to rather, that are keeping them outside of heaven. And so one of the characters has this little lizard figure that's on his shoulder, and it's emblematic and representative of lust. And the guy is being irritated by it, right? He's having like a dialogue with his lust, and a big strong angel comes up to him, and he sees what's happening, and he's like, can I kill it? Like, we can get rid of this problem. And the guy's like, well, no, we don't, you don't have to kill it. He just needs to be quiet, right? It just shows us how we are about our perversion, really. We have these little things that feel like they're us, but they're really not us. And you have this great back and forth between the angel and this guy, who eventually reluctantly agrees to kill this little lizard of lust. And as soon as he does, the lizard transforms into this stallion, and he rides into the kingdom on the stallion. And I mean, I just can't think of a better picture. So often the sin that's killing us, we've sort of negotiated with it instead of just trying to be free from it. And I think lust is one of those that's really, really insidious that way. If we don't begin to address this as an issue, there's going to be an entire generation of young men that are so screwed up that they're not going to be able to lead families. They're not going to be able to be the men that they're called to be, and that's when societies crumble. This may be an unpopular opinion, but at the end of the day, it's not on your accountability group or your Bible study or your friends to keep you from watching porn. We have to make a decision. We have to battle. It's not always easy. And when we fail, that's fine. We get back up. But it has to be something we're waging war against. There's a John Owen quote that I think is absolutely perfect, specifically when it comes to the porn issue. And it's, be killing sin or it will be killing you. So if we're not actively killing this sin, it's killing us. So who's going to win?